Right, thank you for joining us, everyone. Today's session is on designing engaging visuals for teaching and learning. I'm Ruth Fox from the Department of Technology Enhanced Learning here at MTU. If you have any questions, please feel free to add them to the Q&A. I'll answer them at the end of the session, and if I don't know the answer, I'll send an email to you. This has been recorded. It's streamed live on YouTube, so welcome to all of you on YouTube. Thanks for taking the time. And after the session, I'll be sending out the recording as well as any links that I share during this session. So thanks for joining us. Just want to check, Marion, is that the next slide? Everything look okay there? Or Sarah?
We're on the first slide at the moment, Ruth. Yeah.
Is this the fundamentals of slide? Okay, let's go. So
Uh, sorry, we're on the first slide, the cover slide, Ruth.
cover slide, you're not showing.
Mm.
It's
No.
working for me. It's working for me. I can see all the slides.
Okay, maybe it's something my end then.
Okay, great. Okay, so let's start. In this session, I'll be discussing the fundamentals of slide design, sourcing and creating high quality images and assets for your teaching materials. And I'll touch on aligning visuals with teaching goals. And if we have some time, we'll work through a few PowerPoint features. So the first thing I'm going to work through is design principles. This is something that some of you might be familiar with. And if you are, someone who's got a bit of a background in graphic design or in the film industry, this is something that comes naturally to you. But as an instructor, it's not necessarily something that is right at your fingertips. So I'm just going to go through a few basics that'll help you when you design your slide layout. So as I mentioned, it comes naturally to me, but I see many presentations that contain excellent content, but the message is lost due to a poorly designed slide. Not to worry, just by sticking to a few of the basics, you can improve your slide deck. I'm just going to stop sharing my face there because it's absolutely distracting me. Okay, something that can assist you is to achieve this is to apply design principles to the way you present your work. Design principles are used by architects, graphic designers, and interior designers. So when you walk into a room, someone's considered how, people engage with the room, how people feel when they walk into the room. Is it very cluttered? Is it very spacious? Is it, accessible to a lot of people? Design principles are also used to help produce aesthetically pleasing and functionally designed outputs. And as a lecturer, it's important to create a visually cohesive set of slides for your students. The reason for doing this is to assist students in absorbing the information in your presentation more easily and allowing them to see the main teaching points quickly without distraction. So as you can see in this slide, we've said what we're going to be talking about: 4 basic design principles, most relevant to presentation design. And by applying these design principles to your presentation, it will help you to achieve that, to keep your students engaged with the learning content instead of distracted by maybe too much on the page. The first thing I'm going to speak about is visual hierarchy. So visual hierarchy refers to the order of importance of the items on your slides. It guides your user's eye across the slide to the most important elements on the slide. So think of, what do you want people to view first? And then what do you want them to read next? Visual hierarchy is used in graphic design to lead the user's eye across a page. So if you think of a wedding cake, what's something that people want to look at first when they see the wedding cake? It's the top of the cake. So everything's pointing up to the top of the cake. And then look at the rest of the details that are on the cake. In this example, your eye is firstly drawn to the bigger sentence. You will read this first. And then the next sentence, the one below, and finally the smaller sentence at the top of the block. And this is essentially done by creating visual or a hierarchy by making some points bigger and some points smaller. So let's look at how this is actually achieved. The first thing that can create prominence on your page or slide is to make items bigger or smaller. Let's have a look at an example. Here we have a headline where the first sentence is bigger than the rest. Notice how the information on the right all seems to blend into one long sentence. However, on the left, you're able to quickly give meaning to what's happening on the page. So think about your students. If you were to create a page like the one on the right, they wouldn't know necessarily what the heading is. and the headings give your students an impression of what they're going to be learning about. And then the next points below are smaller to, broken up and split up to get more details of what you're discussing. Then, having a picture on the right that relates to the text on the left, but, look at the size and scale of the image versus the content. Another easy way of creating visual hierarchy on your page is to play with the weights of your fonts. So this is an example where we played with the size of the headline. And in the one on the right, some of the text is bold, giving it a more visual prominence. Perhaps you've noticed this when it's been used in the design of the slides in a presentation in the past. So think of your slides. Is this something that you do in your presentations? And then next time you have a look, if you've got a news website, there's lots of news going on at the moment that everyone's chatting about. Look at the size of the fonts used as well as the weight. So how has this affected the way that you've selected articles to read or skim through in a newspaper? Color is also used to create visual hierarchy to make items stand out on the page. Now, if you look at this page, everything's kind of, bland, very much similar shades and contrasts, and nothing really jumps out. If anything, the word color jumps out because we've used a bolder font and it's a little bit heavier than the rest. Notice how the items on the dark background stand out more than the items on the right on the white background. So everything on the right feels weighted the same, but everything on the left feels slightly different. My colleague Roshan Garvey speaks about, accessibility and preparing digital learning content for a diverse learner group. She had a session last week. One of the things to note is using light text on a dark background. If you do, make sure the contrast between the two colors is high and the weight of the font is not too thin, as people may struggle to read this. I recommend less is more approach to light text on a dark background and use it to emphasize points, but also consider other ways to highlight information. So possibly look at making the text bigger and increasing the weight by making it bolder. Students may want to print your slides on a black and white printer. So if you have highlighted a point in red text for emphasis, this will print out black. However, if these two slides were printed in black and white, the one on the left will still highlight the percentage block containing 77% more on the darker background. So the next point is position. So where you place your items on your slide gives them more prominence. When you design your slides, why not try to play around with prominent and not so prominent positionings of items on each slide? Larger slide headings at the top of the slide give your heading more prominence. Now, this is also good practice if you're speaking about accessibility, that you keep your text aligned to the left-hand side, keep your headings at the top. If you are working in something like PowerPoint or you're working in a Word document, consider using things like the various types of headings. So the heading 1, in your style guide, you can choose different types of headings, heading 1, heading 2, heading 3. So all of your slides, perhaps the heading at the top should be heading 1, where it's been formatted to be quite a large font, and then stick to the same size body copy on every slide. This just creates a very calm kind of environment for students where the user experience is consistent on every single slide. As you can see in the example on the right, the slide heading at the bottom right of the page has less pop or less prominence. Now, something I will say about, putting an image on the bottom right-hand side of the page, often when you're streaming on something like YouTube or maybe presenting somewhere, or, you've gone to a conference, people will place closed captions at the bottom of the slide, or they'll place a logo at the bottom of the slide. Another thing to just be aware of is that sometimes when you're streaming live on things like YouTube, if you have your camera on, your face will end up maybe, in the top right-hand corner of the page. So I like to look at things like, leaving the top right-hand corner of the page empty, just in case your face is there and you don't want it to overlap a heading. So keep your headings to the left-hand side, keep them nice and big, but keep them at the top of the page, but just try not to have your headings running all the way across the page, and then you might run the risk of your face being cut off there. Something else to try is using all caps as a tool to give headings and certain items more prominence. So all caps is when it's all, uppercase, and then you've got sentence case, which is where, you know, the text is lowercase and uppercase mixed. So maybe try having a heading that is all in uppercase. What I will say though is that if someone's accessing this via screen reader, sometimes all uppercase reads it as an acronym. So instead of saying try this, it'll be TRY, THIS, exclamation mark. So maybe this is something that is more effective if you maybe printing out a poster that needs to go on a wall. Just think about the students and if they're going to be using accessibility readers and things like that. As you can see, we've combined size, weight, color, position, and all the caps in the layout on the left to guide the audience to more prominent items on the slide. I've already spoken about the screen readers, but you can immediately see that someone's eye is going to be attracted to the try this on the dark background. So in summary, playing with size, weight, color, position, and all caps, you can easily create visual hierarchy on your slides. This will help you give more prominence to certain items on your slide. Split your content, and something we speak of often is, as instructional designers, just to help you chunk your content. It will allow your audience to process more important information first when they view your slides. So another thing that I'm going to speak about is white space. And as a graphic designer, I was taught that there's white space and there's negative space. So white space is essentially the same thing. It's the space around your object. So here you've got this computer isometric visual on the right, and the white space is around it. And the white space would be called, you know, negative space or white space, the purple space around the white space, orange copy on the left. So it's a spaces that's empty and it's got no information in. And this just allows the text and the images to have a little bit of breathing space when a viewer is looking at it. So it's the blank space around the elements on the slide. And it supports the idea that less is better. So in the slide, you'll notice there's a lot of white space versus a page in a newspaper. So while I'm talking about white space, I just want to reiterate, just create some safe space in your slide. So maybe the top right-hand corner for when you're recording on YouTube, maybe the bottom of the page somewhere if you're going to be adding closed captions to your slides at a later stage. So consider where you'll be presenting, and is there maybe a floating logo that also appears at the bottom of the page? So leave that clear as your white space or your negative space. Here is an example to see how more white space can create a calmer layout. The information does not blend into one busy page of text. The page on the right only presents 3 steps in the process. Another slide can be created for the following 3. So you're not printing things when you're presenting to your students. You might be giving them some handouts. You might give them a PDF of information after the presentation. But when you're presenting in class, if you're teaching, if I was a student and I saw the slide on the left, all of that information would be completely overwhelming, and I would just feel like, oh, there's so much to read and take in, and I'm trying to write notes at the same time. Whereas the slides on the right, the information is nicely broken up. Something that you could do as well is maybe introduce 3 different points through animation. So, you know, don't show point 2 and 3, maybe just show point 1, and then your next slide have point 2 added and point 3 added to it. So, you know, often you go to a conference and they say, oh, you only meant to have 10 slides. I almost disagree with that. I would prefer that they allow you to have more slides and then almost give you a word count, say, you know, per slide only have 20 words on a slide or 50 words, instead of saying, you know, you can only have 10 slides and then you're trying to throw about 500 words on one slide. So white space doesn't necessarily have to be white, as I mentioned. It can also be dark background with less text or images on it. Again, make sure the contrast between the white text on a dark background is high to ensure it's easier to read. White space is also referred to as negative space, so it's the empty spaces that balance the information on the page. You can use white space to separate sections, create space, avoid a crowded and busy slide. A clutter-free, minimalistic-looking slide ensures a better user experience and good reading performance. So think of your slides as a fridge. An organized fridge with less well-organized items in makes it easy to see the food that you have for cooking. Jamming your fridge with too many items creates a chaotic environment and it takes longer to find what you need. So generally, the stuff at the back is going to go off and this will lead to frustration. So think of your students in that way. If there's too much, some of the facts are not going to be fresh and sparkly in their brain. They're going to go off at the back of their brains or something like that. Their cognitive load will be high. So they will not only, and they won't understand the content that you're presenting. Try to understand what information is the most important on each page. So make it easier for them by splitting the content up. The next thing that you can try is repetition and consistency. This refers to using smaller or identical elements throughout a design. This is achieved by consistency and breeds familiarity with your viewers and your presentation. Now, how can this be achieved? This is possibly the easiest and most effective way to improve the user experience. My suggestion is to stick to 3 or less fonts on your presentation. There are lots of lovely fonts out there, but like colors, if you use too many to mix a color, you just end up with a horrible brown. So you may have noticed that in this presentation, I've used the same font throughout the presentation. And this has allowed you to, in the back of your mind, focus better on the content and not focus on, oh, that's a pretty curly font. It almost disappears into the background and the words have more prominence. So try and keep your layout consistent, keep all your headings the same size and your body copy the same size to create a calm and predictable experience for your audience between each slide. You may have noticed that the color theme running through this presentation. What I try and do is stick to, if you're working at a company, stick to the brand guidelines. Generally, the colors have been tried and tested in terms of readability. So the contrast between light and dark have been tested. They are used together to create visual harmony and to complement each other. So when you use your brand guidelines, it also gives people a sense of identifying where your presentation comes from. So consider your target audience. Is this externally facing? Who am I presenting to? What colors am I going to use? Am I going to use the MTU brands? So I just see a question in there from Selena. She said, hi, is there a way to get feedback on a material, how accessible it is? Yes, there is a way in PowerPoint where you can check for accessibility, and I'll be going through that later on in the presentation. There's also websites where you can pop your work in and then it looks at the color contrast. Rasheen covered that in her session. So what I'll do is I'll send a link out at the end of that, Selena. Thanks for your question. So just back to looking at your style of images, try to keep your design elements and graphic style of your elements similar. I do understand this is not always possible when sourcing teaching material. Creating bespoke illustrations, if they don't exist, can help you create similar graphic style for your teaching material, or sourcing stock images from a source where you can choose the illustration also comes in handy. I'll be doing a little bit on where you can find images later on in this presentation. We also have, Derek Oakley has a recording of finding and remixing images and videos to use in teaching and learning on the YouTube Tell site. So I'll send that link to you as well. So these are meant to be 3 slides from one presentation. As you can see, the fonts all differ. Colors are not used consistently and the graphic styles are slightly different. These 3 slides all feel like they come from the same presentation. The fonts are the same, the colors are from the same theme, the layouts feel similar, and the graphic styles match. Your audience will spend less time processing the jump between styles and focus on the content instead. As a takeaway, remember to bring all your elements together in your presentation by implementing repetition and consistency. This can be done through the use of 3 or less fonts, a consistent layout, a color theme for your presentation, and a similar approach to graphical design elements. Hopefully you've noticed how this has been achieved in this presentation. The 4th design principle we'll work through is alignment. This is where you place the elements of your slides and helps organize the various elements of your page to create visual connections which boost comprehension and improves the readability of your slide. These items are all placed randomly on the page and the eye jumps from one point to another. So your eye feels very unsettled when you look at the elements on this page. In this example on the right, under the green thumbs up, the items look more organized and are easier to follow. And this is achieved by aligning items on the slide vertically as well as horizontally. And this can be done in PowerPoint in the tool, in the menu bar at the top. So if you go to alignment, shape, format, it says arrange, and then you choose your arrangement that you want to have. If you want to align items vertically, horizontally, there's even a tool where you can space them out evenly. So remember to ensure that similar items are aligned either horizontally or vertically and are evenly distributed. This gives your slide a sense of unity and makes it easier for your viewer to scan the slide and grasp key contacts. So now that you know a little bit about some design tips, often lecturers or whoever's doing a presentation, there's a bit of a struggle to source content. So in this section, I'm going to speak about sourcing and creating high quality assets like images, icons, and videos. I'm touching on this very lightly, just pointing at places where you can find things easily. So let's go for it. So when you're sourcing your images, always check the copyright licensing on images before you use them. I was discussing this in the office last week and found this very welcome bit of information that Irish copyright law includes an exception for illustration for teaching. However, do keep in mind that you should always acknowledge the source. Do not interfere with the author's moral rights, and do not compromise the right holder's ability and exploit their work financially. You can find more information out at the icla.ie website. I will share that link afterwards. So that's good news. Also, something else to understand is understand Creative Commons licenses out there. There's a guide to fundamentals that my colleague Jeremiah has put together, and I'll share a link to that as well. If you have a look at this table, a lot of images that are open education resources or that you find online when you search for them, they'll have Creative Commons license with these little icons on the left. And this table just kind of gives you a good idea if you can copy and publish them, if you need to attribute the author, if you can use it for, commercial use, if you can modify and adapt it or change the licensing of it. So if there's a, cross over the copyright sign, public domain, it means that you can just use it and you don't have to attribute the author. So first point of finding images is that people just simply Google it. But what I would suggest is if you are Googling looking for an image and you need to put something, into a presentation very quickly, it's quite handy to this menu bar at the top here, click on your Creative Commons licenses, and then all the images that are going to pop up will have a Creative Commons license, and you'll know very clearly how you can use them and what type of attribution you need to use when you use the images. And just another tip, that when you are downloading images from somewhere like Google, you have the option to increase the size, download large images, medium sizes, or an icon. I would suggest always downloading the largest file that you can. You just never know when you're going to need to print the image. Sometimes a picture is just suitable to be very small on a website. And what will happen if you put it into your PowerPoint presentation or if you put it into a print document, it's going to print out blurry and it's just extremely frustrating. So that's that. Then also make sure to attribute others for the images. Make it a habit and lead by example. So if you show your students how to attribute an image correctly, they'll find it easier to do the same. So if you're using other people's pictures, just make sure you give them a little bit of a nod. A very handy and easy place to source graphics for your teaching materials is right under your fingertips. So a lot of software that you use every day have a range of stock images inside them. If you're using PowerPoint, Word, Canvas, Google Slides, Photoshop, they all have some stock images, icons, and even videos for you to freely use in your presentations. I was at a conference recently and I just needed a couple of little videos of water flowing. And I was very surprised at the quality of images that were already in PowerPoint that I can place in. Just keep in mind that the files could be very big if you're using things like videos, inserting videos into your presentations from the stock images. So where you can find them, in PowerPoint, you can find them under the Insert tab. So this is your menu bar at the top of the screen. In the insert tab under Icons, you can select icons and then a menu bar will pop up on the right of your screen if you're in a Mac, and you can then search for an icon and even an image that you need. So here I've searched for education, and you'll find there's a whole range of education, little icons, and I find it very handy. If I'm just, I mean, this slide here, that comes from PowerPoint, and then I was able to change the color of it just to suit my presentation a little bit better. So if you need an image, you can also go in via Insert Image and choose the stock images. And again, on the right of your screen, you'll be able to search for the image that you are after. And there's some great images built into PowerPoint. Similarly, Microsoft Word has a repository that's found the same way as the icons and images found in PowerPoint. It's easy to search and upload images into your Word documents. However, one thing to keep in mind when you're working with stock images from software programs, they'll not be unique to you, and other users can access the same images as you. So if you require something bespoke or like completely unique, it's a good idea to call in a photographer or an illustrator or a graphic designer to help you create something that no one else has access to. There's also a number of stock image sites out there that allow you to access limited free stock images. So you might find that you want something that's editable or a specific image, and you generally have to pay a subscription fee. Some of them allow a couple of free downloads. I've previously worked on a project that required very specific images for the med tech sector, of hip implants, knee implants, and heart valves. And I found that free stock images just weren't doing the job for me. So what we did for the project was subscribe to a stock image site that seemed to have the most suitable images. So before you subscribe to anything, I suggest you first of all search for what you need, and then decide, I'm going to subscribe, and maybe, pay for a pack of 25 images or maybe once off subscription. And then I could find exactly what I needed. Each site has their own quirks, and for the work I do, I generally use flat icon or free pick because our department subscribes to it. But some stock sites have basic editing functions, and that can be useful for changing colors and bits of images. These are all external to the supported software that the universities provide. So don't come and look for training in something like Canva or that, because it's not part of the IT remit. You may not always find what you need. As I mentioned, you need something specific for your teaching. For example, you need a technical drawing of, technical drawing of anything, let's say a bridge. These at times can be expensive to produce. However, there are sometimes funding opportunities that can pay for resources like this. So, for example, here at TEL, we had the Reasonable Learning Resources call put out by the university, and a few of the projects are paying for bespoke images to be created. So if you find yourself regularly looking for material, consider investing in creating your own. Even consider sharing them as an open education resource once you have created them, because chances are high there are other instructors out there looking for the same thing. This could potentially lead to collaboration in the future, and if people find you in the same field of expertise and you creating things that they need, they might create some things that you need. So it's a good practice as an academic to maybe look at doing those type of things and to build on each other's work as educators. So on that note, you can also search for images and share images on the open education repositories. And again, always remember to attribute your source. There are other OER places, and I'll share a bit of that with you after this presentation when I email you. So something that I'm going to speak about now is just lightly touching on aligning images with your teaching goals. So images can be used in your slides and teaching material for various reasons. When you want to include an image in your slides, try to think about what value this image is going to add to your lesson. In my mind, some images are purely decorative, like a graphic applied to a page to balance the text on the left, and it's fundamentally a nicely, balanced, well-balanced, lots of negative space page, but it would look very bland without something on the right. However, when it comes to teaching, a screen reader will suddenly read the description of the picture. So just make sure that you add alt text to your presentation and note that the picture is a decorative image and not necessarily, something that they're going to be learning about. So I would suggest that when you are giving teaching presentations, that you try and only include images that are relevant to the content that you're teaching. So as a lecturer, illustrations can be used effectively to explain and introduce concepts. Like this illustration shows the internal workings of a sea urchin. Without this image, it might take you hours to explain to a student what the anatomy of a sea urchin looks like. And teaching them how to identify by explaining, the spine is the spikes on the outside of a sea urchin, and imagine that it is black and long and sharp at the end. So it's far more easy and quick to show your students an illustration and give it, a couple of labels than that. So the same could be said about complex processes. Again, as I mentioned, you may not always find suitable images online, and there could be a need to create something that outlines a process. So here is the water cycle that we're all familiar with as children. We were shown these drawings and we were drawing these drawings, and it just gives students a visual cue of what's actually happening by having a bit of text, having a bit of illustration. Maybe something simpler would have worked better than this one, but it enables you to have a visual cue to talk through a process with your students. So a way that is accessible to most to create their own vector-based process graphics is in PowerPoint. So go to your PowerPoint menu under Insert, and then go to Smart Art, and then you will have access to a few starting points. You can change the colors of the items and even toggle a few bits in terms of size and copy to suit your needs. So there's a lot of times when you go to a presentation and you just need something like this created very quickly, and it's all in PowerPoint for you. Sometimes you can even use this as a starting point. If, say, for example, you were working with a graphic designer and you wanted it to be a little bit more, a bit more upmarket, a bit more bespoke, but you can explain to them just by creating a little drawing like this for them to understand better what you're meaning, or even just a hand-drawn drawing, to be honest. So I'm just a bit conscious of time there. I'm going to go through a couple of these, maybe 10 more minutes. I'm going to go through some PowerPoint features for interactivity, animations, and multimedia integrations, and we'll see how far I get. So one of the things a feature that you have in PowerPoint, and no, I'm jumping around a bit from, slide layout, speaking about where you can get your images, what type of images are suitable to your teaching or content. But then there's also things that you can do in PowerPoint as a lecturer that can make your lectures more engaging and stimulating, and maybe better suited to your subject matter and content. So there's a feature in PowerPoint, if you're not familiar with it, is annotations. And this can be found when you are in presenter view. So you click on that little small pen icon at the bottom, and you can decide if you want to use a laser pointer, a pen, a highlighter, or an eraser. And annotations are drawn onto your slides during your live presentation and can be recorded too. So in your lecture, you have an option to use PowerPoint as a whiteboard in your classes. So whether you're delivering your lecture online or in the classroom, you might find it more efficient to not have to move between slides and a whiteboard or any other program. You'll also find that sometimes you have a smart whiteboard in your lecture venue, and so you'll be able to draw directly onto the slides. So the image on the right is a pen or drawing tablet. If you don't have, a touch screen that you can draw on yourself, you could use a Wacom pad or even a tablet with a stylus and pen, or an iPad to draw on your slides with the pen function. Each requires a different way to connect, and this can be found by doing a search online for instructions. And before going out and purchasing something like a pen or drawing tablet, please check if it's compatible with PowerPoint. So Syed Wagnanabi, a lecturer at the University of Glasgow, uses his tablet this way by firstly creating a template slide. So he puts on, a little bit of information, and then he annotates them in class. This can be done in your lecture venues as well as in online classes. You can choose to save the annotations or delete them, and in a PowerPoint recording, you can have them, that it records your annotations. And then to augment your students' learning, you can potentially explain formulas students are struggling with by annotating your slide and talking through it. And this way, you're not just switching between whiteboards and screens and different programs. It's all in one place and accessible after class. So when you go into slide view, the pen tool is available at the bottom left of the previous screen, as I mentioned earlier. I've zoomed in on this recording so you can see a little bit more clearly. So let's play this. You click on the pen tool, you select your color, and now you're able to annotate on your page. So you can draw in whatever you want to draw in and talk through anything with your students. So when you leave your presentation, you'll be asked if you want to keep the annotations or not. If you want to save them, say yes. Or if you don't want to lose all your annotations, this is, save different versions of your slides. So I hope that gives you a few ideas to use PowerPoint just slightly differently. The next tool in PowerPoint is the ability to create closed captions. Closed captions being text that's generated automatically while you speak during your live presentation. As long as you're close to your device's microphone, you'll be able to generate live closed captions. In presenter mode, you have to go into presenter mode. You click on the CC icon at the bottom left of the page to activate live closed captions or switch them off. And this allows students to follow what you're saying. And this, I'd say it's quite handy with students who maybe English is their second language, maybe they're slightly hard of hearing, maybe they're not familiar with your accent, and it just makes it a little bit easier for them to engage with the content presentation. You can change the appearance and settings available, which allows you to decide where the subtitles appear. So under the subtitle settings, you'll be able to select the languages of choice, which microphone you want to use. And if you go through it, it's quite easy and straightforward to go through these options. Then something that a question that came up earlier on was checking accessibility. So as a lecturer, it's always good to check accessibility when compiling a slide deck. So under the review button, click on the accessibility icon and select check accessibility. This will then highlight ways you can improve accessibility in your PowerPoint presentation. And what it does, it brings up little notes to say you haven't used headings, you haven't formatted this, maybe the contrast is a bit too high. And there's a couple of other programs that you can do the same. So just a couple of shortcuts. If you want to make your screen white, press W. If you want to make your screen black, press B, and then your laser pointer and your pen tool. And then one last thing that I just want to go through with you for now, because I'm just conscious of time, is the first PowerPoint tool that will help you speed up the design process that we spoke about earlier on, is to lay down a good foundation for your slides and create slide masters. And I recommend using your institution or company slide masters. I know people are not a fan of branding, especially in academia. However, when you work with the company brand, people can immediately see where you're from. It can take a lot of pain out of choosing slide colors and fonts for a presentation and actually help you create your slide deck a lot more efficiently. So you find it under View, Master, and Slide Master. If you're working with a template that's been provided to you, you should already have a few layout choices to choose from, or you can create your own when you have opened your Slide Master view. Most slide templates will include a few page layout options for you to use. The first slide is where you can select the entire presentation's fonts. So if you change your font up here, it will change the font across the entire presentation if you've created the slides in Slide Master. For this presentation, our designers created various colorways for each section. Once you have created your slide masters, please make sure you close and exit it by closing your close master slide. And then you're ready to add content to each slide. If you work in your slide masters, you'll end up designing in your slide masters instead of designing your slide deck. So the slide master is almost like a template that is running in the background. So once you've inserted a new slide, you can then select the design that you want to have applied to the slide, or even change the slide's layout. Under the Home tab, select Slides, click on Layout, and then you can select one of the layouts you have already created in Master Slides. I find this tool really saves me a lot of time. As you can see, when I select a different layout, it's automatically updated in the slide that I'm busy designing. And it's a very easy way to adapt the various items on the page to suit your content or define sections in your presentation. Is it a header slide? Is it a content slide? You might want to use master slides to update all of your lecturing slides you've created in the past. For example, you might have old CRT slides and want to apply the MTU logo to them. If you copy and paste your old slides into a presentation with the slide masters already created, you can then select the layout you want, and it will apply the fonts, background, and logos as per the master slides if you select the various layouts. And so I'm conscious of time. I do have a recording of this that I can share with you at a later stage, where we do things like insert videos and files and that. Just going to go to the end of this presentation very, very quickly. And so I hope you understand a little bit more about slide layouts, and I've provided you with a little bit of tips that you can use when you are designing your slides and when you're presenting in PowerPoint. And as mentioned, if there were any links in this presentation that you would like more information on, please email us on edtech@mtu.ie or drop me an email directly. I'm happy to have a chat. And I will be sending out a recording of this and pointing to other TEL resources that you might find handy. But I'll give you some time to go and grab a cup of tea, and thanks to everyone for joining us live, and enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you.